Satundeve Gauravani Vicharne Nirvishesha Shnivadi Paskatyade Satarne. We're trying to come to the platform of pure devotional service. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nishoshiti Nakankshati Samak Sarveshu Bhuteshu Madbhaktim Labhate Param. That when one comes to the platform of being freed from hankering and lamentation, then he becomes joyful. So basically speaking, we're all trying to become joyful. We just don't know what the process of becoming joyful is. Well, we do know. So we know. We just have to follow it as best we can. So the idea of giving up hankering and lamentation, that is part of the process of pure devotional service. As Krishna says, Nasti Yukta, oh, actually, first time I ever forgot. Nasti Yukta, Nasti. Nasti buddhi yuktasya, na cha yuktasya bhavanaha, na cha bhaviyanta shantir, ashantasya kutak sukham. Nasti, na asti, not buddhi. So, we're trying to get intelligence, see things properly, and then have the power to act on what we're seeing. That's called buddhi. Nasti buddhi ayuktasya. So, if one is not ayuktasya, connected with Krishna, then he can't have transcendental intelligence. It's not that we can become advanced in spiritual life without Krishna. That's just not possible. Spiritual life means Krishna. We can come to the Brahman platform, but that's not really very advancement in spiritual life. That's just getting out of the material life, which just doesn't mean it's advanced in spiritual life. Just like if we don't know who we are, it's advancement to give up identifying with something we're not. But that doesn't mean we've come very much closer to understanding who we actually are. To understand who we're not is certainly advantageous, especially if we think we're Frankenstein, or we think we're Dracula and we look at everyone's neck with a great hankering and longing. That's not very good, especially if we're not Dracula. We're supposed to be vegetarians also. But if we find out we're not Dracula, that doesn't mean we don't know that doesn't mean we know who we actually are. So the process of getting out of material misconceptions is certainly valuable, and that's called Varna and Ashram. But as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has expressed, when he was talking to Ramananda Roy, because Ramananda Roy told Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu so many different methodologies of making advancement, beginning with Vanashram. Vanashrama acharavitaha purushena pumakmaman Vishnu arajate panta nanyam astita nanyanam. Probably got that wrong. In any case, Vanashrama acharavitaha purushena pumakmaman, that the beginning of advancement, materially speaking, of course people think advancement is getting more money, getting more wealth, getting more sense gratification, getting more prestige. They take that as advancement. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't take that as advancement. He took that as a problem, as a degradation. Not necessarily, but generally speaking, people hankering for these things is the problem. So he began with Vanashrama Acharvitaha Purushena Pumakpaman Vishnu Arajate Panda. So the aim of Varnashram is to bring us to the platform of giving some respect or some worship to Vishnu. But it's still on the material platform because we're actually not part of the material world. But if we regulate our activities according to Varnashram, then it becomes clearer that we're not part of the material world, that's all. We're eternal souls, we're always situated eternally, transcendentally. So nothing in the material world is actually, we have anything to do with it, other than the fact that we're identifying ourselves with it. But it's much better to take to the platform, to the activities by which gradually one becomes free from these misidentifications, and that's called varnashram. And that's the process of, as Krishna says, Chatura vida bhajante mam jana sukritina arjuna artha jignasya artharti gyani chaparatarshava. There are 4 kinds of pious people they take to devotional service. Those who are in distress, those who are wanting some material comfort, those who are inquisitive, and he who's searching for knowledge of the truth. So that's varnashram. So we can't say, just like there's always in our society, there's this thing, what is varnashram? What do we have to do with varnashram? We're transcendental, or varnashram is essential. Prabhupada said we have to establish varnashram. No, we're already absorbed. Varnashram is eternal. And the principle of varnashram is to gradually elevate the consciousness. And the first consciousness it's supposed to elevate is freedom from distress. Now, I think all of us can honestly say we're in some degree of distress, especially those who are sitting against the wall. Their back hurts them. At least she moved up a little bit on the wall, so she's a little straighter now. In any case, we're always in some kind of degree of distress, because that's what the body is. It's meant for. It's not unusual that we're in distress, because the body is actually meant for distress. It wasn't meant to be heavenly, especially in Ljubljana and Kali Yuga. But why are people in distress? They have no idea. Does anyone have idea what the root cause of distress is? Yes. I can't hear you. But why do people forget Krishna? But why are we in illusion? Yes. Well, what do you have to do to be an illusion? Well, we're getting close to lust. Yes. Those are all safe answers. Now, actually, what is the root cause? Lust. But how do people manifest lust? How does that grow? What do they do to cultivate their lust? Desire. We all desire. The soul, even in the spiritual world, desires. What are the wrong desires? Does anyone know? Welcome to the Hare Krishna movement. You find anything real? Wow. They try to be Krishna. Nothing practical. What's that? Selfishness. Let's try illicit sex, gambling, meat eating, intoxication. Meet anyone who's ever performed any of these activities? Oh. That's far away from our minds. We don't know anything about it. That's a different world. That's somewhere downtown or something. No, because of illicit sex, gambling, meat eating, and intoxication, and mental speculation, people are in distress. It didn't come out of nothing. There was this wave of distress. It hit Ljubljana. Oh my God, we're washed over with distress. Why are people in distress? What are they hankering for? What's that? They're hankering for sinful activities. Do you think everyone last night was completely sober? We don't touch that. That causes us distress. You think when people wake up today, they're going to be in distress? Not because they went downtown and heard the Hare Krishna devotees chanting Hare Krishna. That didn't put them in distress. I hope not. Rarely people get distressed when they see the Hare Krishnas chanting Hare Krishna and dancing. No, so that's the root cause of distress. That's where people apply their lust. People don't apply their lust to getting a pet dog and just my whole life is just petting the dog. Although that is one of the avenues of expressing their sentiment. But generally speaking, that people are dedicated to sinful activity. What we call the pillars of sinful activity, namely illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. And therefore people are not clean, they're not austere, they're not truthful, and they're not clean, austere, merciful. Because they're engaged in sinful activity. So, what is a Shudra? Why is the Shudra lamenting? No one knows. Well, we have to have at least some knowledge why a Shudra is lamenting, what the cause of his lamentation was. Yes. Yes, that's right, because you perform sinful activities, you get the reaction. Anyone ever get a reaction here from sinful activity? No, you get the reaction, and people don't like the reaction, therefore they lament. They want to enjoy, but then the result is they get a sinful reaction, and it's painful, and therefore they lament. So that's why Shudras lament, because they perform sinful activities. So what is the great philosophy of the Hare Krishna movement? What do we tell people to end their reactions to their sinful activities? What do you tell people? If someone said, I'm suffering, what do you tell them? Oh, you poor baby. Chant and be happy. Yes, that's right. Well, at least chant and try to be happy. Tolerate and chant. He'll go away. Or if we chant Hare Krishna offenselessly and we're under the internal energy, we'll actually be blissful and our sinful reactions will be burnt to ashes, just like the blazing fire turns firewood to ashes. So the fire of sinful activities get burnt up by the transcendental consciousness, by Krishna consciousness. But the Shudras, what do? How do they, in the Varnashram system, how are they freed from their sinful reactions? What's that? Oh, demigod, please. No, that won't work very well. Yes. By what? Yeah, but how do they serve? What does the Shudra do to serve? What does he have to do? What is the basic principle? Service, regulation, service. Service to the Shastra, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Shudras have to at least regulate their sinful activities. If you want to eat meat, you can't go open a slaughterhouse. You have to take a goat, according to the Vedas, and take it up to the mountain on a dark moon night, a new moon night, and whisper in the goat's ear. Do you know the mantra? What's that? Yes, now I'm going to slit your throat because you're a goat. And I'm going to eat you, and next lifetime, sometime in the future, you can slit my throat because I'll become a goat. So that's how the Shudras are regulated. They're given, you're not allowed to do anything you want, you have to do it according to the Vedas. You can eat meat, but you have to eat goat meat. And you have to do it once a month on a new moon night, and you have to chant this mantra. And after you cut the throat of enough goats, you start thinking, my God, I mean, this goat burger is not worth it. I got to become a goat soon and have my throat cut. So maybe I should try some prasad or some more, maybe I should become a vegetarian. And similarly to intoxication or illicit sex life, it's regulated. So that one will gradually be able to, if it's regulated, it means one is using one's intelligence. And if one practices using one's intelligence, one can also utilize that same intelligence to hear. And one will hear that these activities of eating, sleeping, mating, defending are not the highest perfection. And by good example of serving the Vaishyas or the Kshatriyas or the Shudra gets, or the Brahmins, the Shudra gets an example by which he follows. And gradually starts making some advancement, like protecting the cows. He may be protecting the cows, or he may be helping the Brahmins who are pure. He may start washing his hands, whatever. By good association, the Shudra not only refrains from unrestricted sense gratification, but gradually takes on better habits by good association. And then one may become a Vaishya. Where the Vaishyas, generally speaking, they're not engaged in sinful activity, and they're engaged in something positive. They're engaged in protecting cows, which provide nice food for this society. So the Vaishyas, like even Nanda Maharaj, is a little fatty. If you go to India, at least previously, women were supposed to be a little fatty. Is that right? It wasn't a good sign that the woman was too thin, because it meant she wasn't, they didn't have enough money to feed her. Is that right? Did you say that? What's that? Yes, that means that's a good family. It means it's an opulent family. If a woman's too thin, that means that the family must be poor. So if the family's poor, I shouldn't marry her, because I'll be poor too. But if the woman's nice and big, that means that she must be eating well, so the family must be rich. So she's a good candidate for marriage. Because in the Western world, if you're nice and thin, it means you're hungry. So that's good. Because you're not attached. You're nice and hungry, so you're not attached, and therefore I don't really have to take care of you. You're an easy, I can marry you, and so it doesn't cost me very much, because I don't have to feed you very much. But the Vaishyas generally ate well because that was what they did. They weren't trying to get cars and boats and things like that. They were just trying to get good food. And because they got nice gulab jamins and puris and kachoris, and they had nice sabjis and everything, therefore they were actually satisfied. You can't eat a boat unless you're Chinese. You can't eat an airplane. You can't even eat your car. Although there was one person, he ate a bicycle. He ground up the bicycle into little bits and added it to his food every day. So he has the Guinness Book of Records for eating a bicycle. But most of us are not interested in eating bicycles yet. Although it's a good source of iron. Especially if it's rusty. But the Vaishyas were nicely fed, and therefore they were contented. People who are big and fat, they're pretty satisfied. And besides that, they don't need so much clothing because they have insulation. So they're a bargain. You don't have to get a big insulated house for them. You don't have to. They're well fed. So the Vaishyas, they protect the cows. And the cows are the most important source of food. And also Balaram has the plow, so he's plowing the field. So they know the real value of life is fresh food, clean air, because if you protect the cows, then the whole atmosphere becomes purified. You don't need a factory. You don't need chemicals. Then their air can be pure, the water can be pure. People's minds are pure because they're not hankering, they have nice food. Prasadam. So they're satisfied, so their minds are peaceful. People's minds are not peaceful because they don't eat properly, actually. Because they're not getting proper nutrition, therefore the body's agitated, the mind's agitated. But if we eat nicely, prasadam, and in the proper consciousness, then the mind becomes satisfied, the belly becomes satisfied, the consciousness becomes satisfied. And so the soul can think of even something higher, which means it becomes inquisitive. Is there anything better than just being happy in the material world? Because the soul can't really be happy in the material world. He needs something more. So he becomes inquisitive and he learns from the Brahmins. That's the Kshatriyas. What's the higher states of consciousness? The heavenly planets, Maharloka, Janaloka, Brahmaloka, Brahman, whatever. He hears about higher consciousness. And then when one achieves higher consciousness, Brahman realization, the highest material consciousness is Brahman realization, then one still is thinking maybe there's something better, like Shukadeva Goswami. Then he hears about Krishna. So there's a gradual process of natural elevation if one takes to the process. It doesn't have to be done. It can't be done artificially generally. Although in this age, because we have the opportunity to chant Hare Krishna, we don't necessarily have to go through the whole Varna and Ashram system. If we chant Hare Krishna offenselessly and accept the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and understand that we should act on the spiritual platform to love Krishna, cooperate with his servants, and help the innocent, and avoid the atheists, if we accept that process, then we can be immediately elevated to a transcendental platform and elevate ourselves very quickly from the modes of material nature. From being a Shudra or a Vaishya or a Kshatriya or a Brahmin, and at least the consciousness, the modes of nature are attached to those things. But in the meantime, when we have those modes of material nature, we shouldn't give them up because we have to survive in the material world. We're not Haridas Thakur's chanting 23 hours a day, or Raghunath Das Goswami's eating a little pat of buttermilk. So we have some duties to do. So while we're performing those duties, whatever it is in order to get the proper nourishment for our body and our minds and develop our intelligence, we should have a sense of Krishna consciousness. We should be acting on the spiritual we should be at least on the spiritual platform of consciousness while we may be acting in the material world in different activities in order to maintain the body and the soul together. But that sense of Krishna consciousness should be there, seeing Krishna as the object of our love and worship, seeing the devotees as our object of service, seeing the innocent people as our object of mercy, and seeing those who are against Krishna as someone to avoid, not to get entangled with. Then we can very quickly come to the spiritual platform and remain there. So, Rantideva, he wasn't interested in the demigods because he was on the transcendental platform. He didn't worry about sinful activities, he didn't worry about getting enough to eat, because even when he didn't get enough to eat, he was still living in the spiritual world. It says that Raghunath Das Goswami was fasting every day or every other day, he ate a little bit of buttermilk. But it said that he was living in the spiritual world in his consciousness, and every day he had 3 big feasts of prasadam. So on this platform, he apparently was starving, but he was getting fat in the spiritual world. Maybe not necessarily fat, they have very good digestion there. They never get fat. They're always the same weight in the spiritual world. The spiritual body is always perfect for eating prasadam. So we may think, well, that's just, too subtle for me, But actually, it's the subtle taste of the food that we actually enjoy. Therefore, the demigods, when they just hear the prayers and the sacrifice, they actually become satisfied just by the prayer. So in the spiritual consciousness, the unlimited enjoyment is much subtler than the gross enjoyment. And whatever enjoyment we get out of this gross material body is only due to the fact however subtly we perceive things. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes. We have a microphone right there.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the lecture. Sorry for my bad English. I would like to ask you something about Varnashram. I listened in a lecture that it's good for us to be in some ashram. And I want to ask you about the student life, that if we don't have a family, like who are devotee, it's a little bit more hard for us to be in Krishna consciousness, like, how to say, how we can keep ourselves more safe as a student.
As a student?
Yeah.
Well, safety is always in our consciousness, begins with our consciousness, because we work with our intelligence and we work with our mind. So we have to get our daily dose of Krishna consciousness. Chant Hare Krishna, read Prabhupada's books, try to see how that relates to my particular situation. Some of the obstacles I may face, some of the things I may do which may cause me difficulty because whatever misconceptions I may have, and try to avoid them. Student life means, generally speaking, our association is not very Brahminical. Most of the students are not trying to become Brahmins. That's not what they're studying for. But because we're persons, and therefore we have a tendency to want to socially fit in, because we're social beings, therefore we may do things and say things which may compromise our Krishna consciousness. And then we find that the people that were so-called accept ourselves in our compromised position, they themselves are in ignorance. And therefore they're just following someone else to be accepted also. But they have no idea what they're doing. So we should know what we're doing, and therefore we shouldn't easily give up our Krishna consciousness just for a little bit of insignificant acceptance in our social circles. Then if we take shelter of Guru and Krishna and Prabhupada, then the result is that we'll have a little bubble of protection. We'll have our we won't lose our intelligence just due to bad association. And then we'll be able to find people we can give good association to and cultivate their Krishna consciousness and find our own association rather than seeking the normal mundane association that's available in the universities.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for your lecture. Question is, I understood that Brahman realization is the highest material realizations, but is one not liberated when one is Brahman realized?
No. There is a kind of liberation, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, but it's not real liberation. Otherwise, Lord Brahma wouldn't say, Yanyeva Ravindaksha Vimuktamaninas Tavdastabhavada Vishuddha Buddhaya. You know that verse? Yanyeva Ravindaksha Vimukta. The one who doesn't actually meditate upon the lotus eyes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although he thinks himself to be liberated, but because his consciousness is contaminated, because he's not Krishna conscious, therefore he's sure, patanyada nadrita yushmat angraya, although he's risen up to the platform of so-called liberation, he'll eventually fall down from it. So it's not real liberation. Real liberation is eternal, not something temporary. So it's the realization of what we're not, that I'm not this body, therefore I'm spiritual soul. But the spirit soul is not just spirit soul. He has some identity. His actual identity is in relation to Krishna. He has a form, he has qualities, he has a mind, intelligence, he has variety, all in relation to Krishna, as Krishna's servant. So real liberation is Krishna consciousness. Vimukti, not just mukti. Vimukti maninas.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande.